you've been a successful salesperson for many years, but you feel ready and motivated to apply for a new challenge, maybe a leadership position, perhaps as a sales manager. However, you don't have any leadership experience. How do you present yourself so the lack of leadership experience won't become a big negative in the job interview?
That's a really, really good question. And I kind of want to answer it two ways. Okay. Yeah. The first thing I need to say about this situation is actually it's quite a difficult one that lots of people face. And the real issue here is that doing a job versus managing someone doing that job are wildly different skill sets. Okay. So again, if we stick with sales, I've known of some salespeople who are terrific at sales and are hopeless managers, and vice versa. You know, it happens because the skill sets are different. So if I go back to a slightly more general point around this, what I would really want anyone to do, given that they're at the cusp of changing between one to the other, is to actually go and get some experience at managing. You know, whether and I know that's not often possible, but if you can, then I really want you to have a go at you know, standing in for your boss when they're off doing something else or whatever, you know, or doing things external to the job, which I'll come back to in a moment, and gain some kind of leadership experience. Now, if you've got that, then you can relate that back in your CV and also in your interviews. Okay, so that would be useful. And to be honest, it doesn't have to be experience in the job. You know, I mean, if you managed your son or daughter's local, you know, football team or whatever, that is leadership experience. You know, and it's in a different context. And I will talk in a moment about how you reframe that to make it sound more useful. But it doesn't actually necessarily have to be in the job. I did some work with a lot of women. It was, I was going to say parents, but no, it was actually all women who had gone off and they'd had children. They'd left their jobs because they had children, and then somewhere between 5 and 10 years later, when their children had properly gone to school and everything, and they fancied getting back into the job market, they were putting together CVs and things and going, well, actually, I don't have any experience of anything. You know, everything I did was 10 years ago. And the reality of it, though, is that when you sit down and you look at some of these women, they've got phenomenal amounts of experience. I mean, I just remember this one particular woman who was a single mother, and she brought up 2 kids, and she was on the Parent Teachers Association. She ran school clubs. She did a whole lot of this sort of stuff single-handedly. Now, if that doesn't say, you know, huge organisational skills, bearing in mind that she was in you know, parent teachers, and she was school boards and convincing people to do this, that, and the other, and running charities. She was basically convincing people to do things without having any kind of organisational power over them. So she was a good persuader. And when you sit down and deconstruct all of those skills, you go, she's a perfect PA, absolutely perfect. And so we just restructured her CV to reflect the actual experiences she's got. So if I go back to the point, I think if you look at people get a little bit tunnel visioned about what they would consider their experience. And when you're talking about moving into a different kind of a role, you might want to take a wider look at the things that you're doing and relate that back to the job. Okay. Now, again, like I said, my favourite position in all of this is to take worst case scenarios. Okay, so let's take the scenario where actually you think you're good and ready for a leadership position, but nowhere in your career or in your outside life have you got any experience of leadership. Okay, now I'm I'm never going to say that's going to be an easy situation. Okay. What I am going to say is that what you should be doing is looking at this and looking for the advantages of not having the experience. Okay, so where I'm coming from is you turn around and go, okay, what benefits are there to the company for me not having any leadership experience? Off the top of my head, I'll go for two. Okay, the first one is that makes me a blank slate to be able to write your your ideals of leadership into. So I would focus on things like being a fast learner, very adaptable, flexible, and I take on company values or corporate issues very, very quickly. And here's my evidence to say all of that. The benefit to you as a company is then I'm very moldable into your version of a leader. Okay. The other kind of advantage that I'm thinking of is, as a straight reframe, is to turn around and say, do you want the same old, same old? Do you want leaders that are, that have read all the theories and done all the training and have just gone in and done all of that because that's what they do? Or do you want someone that has some initiative or is going to look at this whole situation with a fresh pair of eyes? And look at it not in terms of an experienced leader that's doing the same as they've always done, but is looking at this in terms of someone who's done the job and now needs to learn how to motivate people to do the job, which I can bring all my sales experience to bear. Do you see where I'm getting to with that?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so effectively, I suppose the key thing here is to start looking at this in a way of saying, well, how does my lack of experience actually benefit the role? And then you need to, once you've got that idea, you need to construct your CV or resume to reflect that. And also then you need to be prepared for that sort of thing in the interview, because that's where it's gonna come out most. And the reality of it is, if we look at this lack of experience thing, sometimes an interviewer won't mention it. They may not mention it because they have not thought about it. They may not mention it because in some situations it's illegal to. Like if they think you're too old or too young, or if they think you're the wrong gender, it's a man's job and you're a woman, or vice versa, or whatever. So in those kind of situations, interviews can be in quite a difficult spot to be able to mention anything like that. So it might be in their heads, but they won't say it, and that leaves you in this disadvantage in that you can't, that you haven't fielded the issue and turned it round into an advantage. What I'm going to suggest to you is that if you know that this is an issue in the interview, you should bring it up so that you can, if they don't, you should, so that you can reframe it and turn it into an advantage. Yeah. So. It's never the greatest of situations, but if you hit the benefit statements in the right way, it can be an extreme advantage, because you are different, and it reflects that difference. And so long as you can make that look like a bigger benefit to the organisation than the risk of taking something they don't know, you're in.